Today I want to share with you some thrifty kitchen tips to make the most of our food budgets and extend what we have in our pantries right now. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, ferments, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Well, it's a very rainy and stormy afternoon here in Central Texas, and you may hear some of the rain banging on my kitchen door here or some thunder, but I wanted to take some time to chat with you and just check in with everyone and see how you're all doing. And during this time when so many of us are homebound and may not be going to the grocery store, I wanted to share some of my thrifty kitchen tips with you for how I try to really get the most out of the food that I do have on hand. For those of you who've been with me for a while, you know that I don't like to waste anything. And for those of you who are new, welcome. And as my goal generally is, I like to try to have as much of a no-waste kitchen as possible. So I've often shared with you in the past, and I really wanted to repeat this today because it's so important. Whenever you're preparing any kind of vegetable, don't throw out the scraps. If you've made a roast chicken or you've cut up a chicken and you've cooked it in parts and after the meal you have the bones left over, save all of those and then also save your scraps, even if they're just peels from your carrots. Save everything. And then you can make what I call roast chicken bone broth, and that's basically taking the bones that you have left over after cooking a chicken that's on the bone, and then adding some of those vegetable scraps. And literally for pennies, you can make wonderfully rich and nutritious and gelatinous. You know, I always stress that. We like our bone broth to be rich in gelatin that's very soothing to our stomachs. But you can make this beautiful, rich and gelatinous bone broth that can be a wonderful base for soups and stews or cooking grains in. There's so much that you can do with bone broth. And there's something that I want to share with you about bone broth that's very important. I don't think I've mentioned this before. I spend a lot of time talking about how to make it gelatinous. But what's very interesting about bone broth is it's known as what's called a protein sparer. And I often think about this when I think of my parents. My mother and father lived through the Depression of the 1930s and then through World War II, when food was very difficult to come by often, and especially in the city where my father and his family lived. Often during the Depression, they had very little to eat, but the butcher would look kindly upon them and give them some bones, and the bones might just have little bits of meat left on them. And my grandmother, Mary, after whom I'm named, would turn them into a broth, which she would feed to her family, and she would pull off every little scrap of meat that was on those bones. Well, the good thing about bone broth is that being that it's what we call a protein sparer, it allows your stomach, your gut, to absorb as much protein as possible. So if you just have a little bit of meat and the bone broth helps you really absorb every little bit of protein from that little bit of meat that you might have. And my father often credits that broth to keeping him and his brothers and sisters alive during the Depression. So save your scraps, whether you have bones from meat or bones from chicken and some vegetable scraps, make a bone broth. You don't have to go and buy expensive bones. You can very easily just use the scraps you have left over from meals that you've already made. And the vegetables, the more vegetable scraps that you can add, whether they're onion skins or little bits of celery or the carrot shavings, whatever the case may be, whatever you have, the more lettuce, that's a wonderful thing to add into bone broth. Whatever vegetables that you're able to add in will add minerals to your bone broth, which the bones generally don't have a lot of minerals. It's difficult to leach them out of the bones. You'll get a little bit of calcium and things like that, but overall the bulk of the minerals are going to come from your vegetables. Now I just have one caveat is that when it comes to your cruciferous vegetables, things that are like cauliflower and broccoli, those I generally don't put into my bone broth because they're high in something that's called goitrogens. So they're best cooked and their water discarded because goitrogens can be very hard on your thyroid. Now, if you're just eating them, putting them in your bone broth every once in a while, that's fine. But it's probably not something you want to do on a regular basis, and something that you definitely don't want to do if you have thyroid problems. However, other than just eating broccoli and cauliflower cooked, there's a lot of things that you can do with them, as well as all vegetables. And I have a series of videos that I call Cooking with Scraps, because I'm a big fan of cooking with scraps. Nothing gets thrown out. And I'll be sure to link to that in the iCards and in the description below. Now, another thing I want to mention that my mother often talks about, especially during World War II. Now, during the Depression, they definitely had a garden, and definitely had a garden during World War II. You may have heard those referred to as victory gardens. And I really think right now, we really need to bring that back. We all need to start gardening again, and we need our victory gardens. And even if it's just a couple of pots on your patio or on your balcony if you're in a city apartment, there's nothing like growing your own fruits and vegetables. And even if you just want to start with herbs, herbs are so nutritious, and they contain all sorts of antioxidant and antiviral and antibacterial properties. You really can't go wrong. And the herbs in many ways are like weeds. They're relatively easy to grow. And when it comes to trying to grow some of your own food, you can recycle your coffee grounds. So if you're a coffee drinker and you have your coffee grounds, don't throw them out. Just put them aside in a bowl and then go and throw them in and mix them into your soil. They're very helpful. And speaking of gardens, speaking of victory gardens, I want to share a channel with you. This is my friend Rob, and he lives in Virginia, and he's a suburban gardener. And he grows all kinds of things, and he does lots of experimentation, and he shares his successes and his failures. He's even doing mushrooms inside under grow lights. He does all sorts of things. And I will definitely link to his channel below. And the name of his channel is Ession's Family Garden, and he gardens along with his wife, and he has two lovely young boys, and it's just a terrific channel. And if you are new to gardening and you're doing suburban gardening or maybe city gardening, he can be a wonderful resource to get you started. And next, I want to talk about eggshells. Eggshells have multi-uses. Number one, rinse them out and save them, and you can add those in when you make your bone broth, going back to bone broth. And they will add some calcium into your bone broth. Also, save them and crumble them up with your coffee grounds and put them into your garden, because just like they give us nutrition, they give our gardens nutrition. And since they're high in calcium, you can even dry them and you can make your own calcium vitamins out of them. Now, I am not an expert in doing that, but my friend Heidi is, and she has a wonderful channel, and I think a lot of you already know about Heidi. Her channel is Rain Country Homestead. And I will definitely, again, any of the channels I mentioned, I'll put links to them in the description below. Heidi is a wealth of knowledge. She and her husband Patrick are small-scale homesteaders, and what they do on a small, basically a suburban-sized lot, I think it's a third or a quarter of an acre, I can't remember exactly, but they've got a garden and greenhouse and chickens, and Heidi's doing all kinds of cooking and herbal tinctures, and Patrick's doing repairs and all sorts of things. You can really learn a lot if small-scale homesteading is of interest to you. But definitely when it comes to making homemade vitamins and herbal preparations and so on and so forth, Heidi is the master of all of this on YouTube. So save those eggshells and get the maximum out of them that you can. And the next thing that I want to talk about are onion skins. If you're peeling onions and you're making a dish, you're cooking something, whatever the case may be, don't throw those onion skins out. Now, I think you know that from when we talked about bone broth. They're wonderful to put in a bag, put in your fridge, put in your freezer, save for when you're ready to make bone broth. You've got those onion skins. They add color, they add flavor, but most importantly, they add nutrition. It's amazing how many vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, pretty much everything are in the skin of the onion. And not only can you add them to bone broth, but you can also just make onion skin broth. It's very tasty. It literally is costing you nothing to make, and then you can use that as a base for soups, or you can use that to cook rice or grains in to really infuse it with wonderful flavor. So you're providing variety to your palate, your family's palate, friends, whatever the case may be, especially when food may be somewhat limited and your ability to go grocery shopping may be somewhat limited, and you want to constantly be trying to introduce new flavors and some variety into your cooking. Onion broth is going to come to your rescue. And one thing I want to mention, this is a little unrelated to food, but it's something very important right now and something that we're all very concerned about, is hand sanitizers and cleaning products for the home. And I think those of you who know my friend Denise at the channel This and That with Denise, well, Denise is a nurse. And Denise, and God bless her, you know, she really is a wonderful, wonderful person. And she has 2 videos out. She has many, many videos on her channel, but she has 2 videos right now which are really excellent. One is how to make hand sanitizer, and one is how to make a cleaner to clean your home. And also while you're there, you'll definitely enjoy her channel if you're new to her. She is a traditional homemaker, but as she says, traditional homemaking, I think for the modern woman, something like that's very cute, or for today's woman. And she has a lot of wonderful videos that you'll find very helpful, especially if you're at home right now. So as with the others, I'll definitely be sure to put a link to her channel below. And definitely, I hope you'll get a chance to visit with Rob and Heidi and Denise and let them know that I sent you over there. I think you're going to enjoy all 3 channels. And with a little bit of time on our hands, it's nice to have some friends to watch that are really teaching us some wonderful things. And I want to share that I have a website. Those of you who are new may not be familiar with it, but I do have a website. It's the same name, Mary's Nest, marysnest.com. And I'll have a blog post over there that's going to coordinate with this video, where I go over everything that we discussed here, as well as some other things. And I'll have some video links there for how to make bone broth, as well as some other recipes. And they all have recipes that you can read online or can print out. So definitely be sure to head over there. So if you are spending a lot of time at home right now, and you're in the process of making that transition from a processed foods kitchen to a traditional foods kitchen, and you want to start learning how to master the basics of traditional nutrient-dense foods cooking, be sure to click on this video over here, where I have 15, I believe it's 15 videos that takes you through all of those: bone broth, cultured dairy, ferments, sourdough, and so on and so forth. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country Kitchen. Love, God bless, and stay well.